Whiteness Theory, as described by Stuart Hall and Noel Ignatieff and Benilis de Silva, is about the illusion of race. Race is a social construct. There's no genetic, biological evidence to support differences between people based on what we see in our hair, skin, and bone, as Stuart Hall mentions, as race. It's aesthetic, really, is what it's about. Noel Ignatieff describes being a race traitor because he says, abandon being what you would call a white. You need to identify with others in order to understand and have community cohesion and remove the oppressive blocks to all kinds of stuff. He goes on at length. So my hope was to look at the way Indigenous people in different countries, especially Canada, had been studied over the last 20 years specifically, though I considered historically distant documents as well, and point out this problematic viewpoint of the separation between the researcher and the researched, the etic gaze upon the object of their research, that being Indigenous people, and basically what a mistake that was. I was happy to discover, in fact, that probably because of the intentions of most research in these areas, there were elements of this whiteness theory, raceless cohesion in in every article that I looked at, actually. I had to look hard sometimes, but to be honest, I was not disappointed to find that I could never find a complete absence of this approach. None of them was completely raceless either. Some came close, and that is just something that I would hope to achieve myself in the future. Well, I've recovered from my cold.
One face. Voiceover off.
But as I'm legally blind, I will need to use my technology to cover the notes from my paper. I will point out that at the end of each extract, my assistant tells you the page number of the extract.
1 of 1. Indigenous share. Indigenous whiteness. The sample is based upon an initial topic centered around helping First Nations youths in the Calgary area, initiated by a growing awareness of an extremely high suicide and extremely low post-secondary education rate in those populations. This awareness was created initially through conversations with social workers working with the community, and then with individuals in the Siksika and Tsuut'ina communities themselves. Those materials, however, eventually proved to be the sample which I needed to analyze. P. 13. The original reading done did indicate something unexpected about the research around this population. It was noticed that most of the research was done by researchers outside of the First Nations population. And in combination with the conversations mentioned above, a different approach to the topic seemed appropriate. To reiterate the comment that Ms. Desus, a Mohawk consultant, gave, she wondered why I wanted to do such a study when I was an outsider to the population. And then she pointed out the ongoing victimization of that population by the research historically. Her comment, and the neutral to negative responses of the contacted elders, social workers, and band administration staff, redirected attention back to the researchers and away from the subjects. Ultimately, it seemed best to use the pre-whiteness theory aware material as a sample of a standard research approach in this sociological area, and to see what whiteness theory had to say about the results. P. 14. Using Interpretive Research Synthesis, Weed, 2008, recommends first choosing 4 distinct articles for an initial comparison, which builds a breadth and context for the subsequent iterative comparisons via maximum variation sampling. Weed makes the case for this conceptual sampling, explaining the qualitative researcher's task of assessing the data to determine its interpretive value, not simply random or representative sampling for quantitative credibility. p. 15. I propose a whiteness theory spectrum within these. First, 4 examples. Proceeding from most to least raceless, La Liberté, Haswell and C. 2012. Promoting the health of Aboriginal Australians through empowerment, eliciting the components of the Family Wellbeing Empowerment and Leadership Program. Wood, 2004. Pressured from all sides, the February 1913 surrender of the northeast corner of the Tsuut'ina Nation. Grego, 2015. Maybe National Park, consultation, conservation, conflicts in the Okanagan Similkameen, and then Hongaan, 2012. Incorporating Aboriginal education into public education, one way to improve relations between Aboriginals and settlers, old and new. In Canada, p. 23. Interpretive Research Synthesis Decisions Audit and Exclusion Criteria. The initial article choices were first selected by their distribution amongst the 4 literature categories I had created. To exclude research that was likely unsuitable for this synthesis, I relied on a very simple technique of assessment using the article's very descriptive titles combined with my recollection of the article's general tenor. For example, I recalled noticing that Hongaan was doing research on Canada while a scholar with the School of Foreign Languages, Liaoning Normal University, China, and that Grego, conversely, had impacted me with the depth of her on-the-ground research in the Okanagan. I recalled La Liberté et al.'s Australian article as being a possible source of actual Indigenous inclusion in the program's development. After the title's rich appropriateness caught my eye, and Wood needed to be included simply because she'd done so much work on local First Nations communities that she kept showing up in my searches. I excluded numerous collections and literature. Reviews from this review p. 24. The surprise to this was the discovery that all of the investigated articles could reveal some element that would fit into the racelessness intention of whiteness theory. Whether the statistical analysis of the General Social Survey or the ecosystem meandering in the Okanagan, one could find the emic cohesion of racelessness in some form in each example. This was an encouraging discovery, though it included the equivalent opposite of every research effort, including semetic racial disconnection. p. 31. Ultimately, all sociological research suggests that it is for the greater good of humanity, in whatever form the research takes. Whether it is for the good of a selected portion of humanity or the entirety of the species depends upon many factors, not the least of which is the examination of power relations within the research field itself. As a tool of betterment, whiteness theory challenges us, forcing us to climb a step higher on our social path in the research field, gaining a detail in understanding and therefore resolution through the emic participation of subjects in the gathering of knowledge. In support of this, we described the aim of IRS as meta-synthesis, to make conceptual links across previously unconnected areas of undiscovered public knowledge. 2008. Whiteness theory certainly asks its audience to make this kind of conceptual link, as we must connect areas we admire amongst what we discover we know: community engagement, historical reconciliation, contemporary identification, to motivate ourselves towards the ends we desire. p. 32.
Thanks, Nkema, for your help. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great conference.
Voiceover on camera. Portrait flip. 6. Stop. Viewfind. Stop.